McCutcheon versus the FEC in 2014 took that a step further and said not only is all of that acceptable, you don't have to report it. You don't have to be held to standards of putting straightforward information about where your money is coming from. Therefore, all of these interests that want to play in politics, all of these folks who have money to burn and who have a special interest to protect, can aggressively bankroll candidates and don't think for a second that it doesn't come with a quid pro quo. Elected officials will tell you that's not the case. They will say, look, we have to get elected, so we have to do some aggressive campaign fundraising. But human nature is such that if somebody is a massive contributor to your own personal development, you're going to listen to that person. He's going to have access that your average other constituent might not. If you ask me, you take these three decisions together, and what you have is the beginning of the destruction of our American political system. We need to fix this. Now, having said all that, that is all by way of saying that judicial positions matter. I'm telling you that the Supreme Court has screwed things up with these decisions, and we've got to fix that. I'm also telling you that at the state level, the justices on the Supreme Court and all the courts have responsibilities that might not be as dramatic. It might not affect an entire nation, but it certainly affects elections and our way of life. Here's the example I will share. I arrived in Harrisburg as a young senator. I think I was 12 at the time, 1980. What started to bubble up immediately was the talk about the redistricting. And there was literally a year and a half of negotiations and give and take, and in addition to everything else that is being done in the legislature, believe me, not far from elected officials' mind is the critical issue of re-election. It dominates. Let's be honest about it. So in order to get to re-election, the process by which folks do get re-elected and the actual shape of their district matters. And it matters once every 10 years. And what has happened in Pennsylvania, from my completely unbiased perspective, is that the Republicans have been better at redistricting than Democrats, because they get it. They understand that, while you should be on your game all the time, while party organizations should be as effective as they can be to elect the people that they believe in. I get that. For some reason, over the last 30 years, the Republicans have geared up for battle much more effectively the year before redistricting occurs. And it's happened every decade. 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 40 years, really. And the consequence of that is that the Republicans end up holding more seats in the legislature than the Democrats do when it comes time to write the bill on redistricting. And even if the Democrats can muster the ability to amend or fix or argue, inevitably, and each of the last 10-year cycles, it ends up before the Supreme Court. So it matters who's sitting on the Supreme Court, if for no other reason than in a very real sense, they determine the shape of the districts. The shape of the districts then determine whether Republicans or Democrats get elected. Make no mistake about it. Pennsylvania has 1.3 million more Democrats registered in Pennsylvania than Republicans. And yet there's 13 Republican congressmen and 5 Democrats. What's wrong with this picture? Well, if you look at the districts as they exist today, the congressional districts are atrocious. They make no sense. You know, you'll have a congressman, well, like this district right here, stretches the whole way from Derry Township to Easton, straight across Route 81, Route 78. There's another district that stretches the whole way from Wilkes-Barre down to Chambersburg. Does that make sense? They're very different areas, if you think about it. The congressional districts really have no resemblance to the culture or the demographics of a particular area. They're drawn for one reason: to make it easier for one party to elect their candidates. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong or illegal about that. You know, from a purely political, partisan perspective, let's give them credit. These guys are smart. They've taken advantage of their opportunities, and they've made full use of the relationship between the legislative and the judicial. So, if for no other reason than getting a fair shake at redistricting and tamping down the gerrymandering that has gone on for too long in Pennsylvania, pay attention to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court races. Now, quite honestly, I think that judicial candidates are entitled to a kind of a different standard of review. You know, you'll hear Democrats and Republicans slugging it out for state Senate seats and House seats and so on. I think the questions that you have to ask judicial candidates are a little bit different. And this may sound like sacrilege, but it is less important on the bench what your party is than where your heart is, what your philosophy is, what is fair. Are you going to decide cases in an unbiased manner? I think by and large our judges do that. But it's important for you as citizens to make sure that they do, and to make sure that the people that serve on the bench are not only qualified, but decent individuals who are a cut above when it comes time to consider character. Do you know what I mean? It makes a difference when they're deciding people's fates and handing out sentences.